Quick question. When's the last time someone commented on your band's LinkedIn post because they wanted to, not because they needed something from you? If you're drawing a blank, stick around. Today's guest, Jason Patterson, founder of Jewel Content Marketing Agency, grew his own LinkedIn followers from about 4,000 to 22,000, not by chasing customers, but by chasing fans first. And he says most small B2B companies have this exact thing backwards. Find out why people who buy from you and the people who boost you online are almost never the same crowd, and what to do about it when you've only got the bandwidth for one strategy, not two. This is Strategy Talk. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Dorien Morin-van Dam.
Hello, everybody. This is Strategy Talks. It's Tuesday and we're live. We're live early today. I'm very excited to introduce you to my guests in just a minute. But before we do, I want to welcome all of you who are here live. Maybe you're watching this on LinkedIn or on YouTube or on Facebook. I see there are some people live here already. And just remember, because we're live, you get to ask questions of myself, of my guest. And so that's the really special part about going live. Plus, you get to see us react live to each other's questions and answers, which is really awesome. I want to make sure that those of you who listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast are welcomed as well. We want to make sure that you understand we value you. So we're going to get right into it. We're talking about B2B and how to, grow your visibility on LinkedIn. So without much further ado, here's Jason Patterson. How are you today, Jason?
I am great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
That's great. So last year, season 4 on Strategy Talked, it was the year of international experts. And this year, I've had the pleasure of actually having quite a few people from different countries. Jason, you're in a country that somebody hasn't been on my podcast yet. So where are you located right now?
I am in Taiwan, Taipei specifically.
That's awesome. So I love that we have such a diverse group of guests and also diverse group of audience members from all over the world joining us. So that's really exciting. So we're going to talk about B2B needs fans, not just customers. I've never heard anybody talk about this, Jason, and that's why I'm so excited today. So you went from 4,000 to 22,000. The first question I had for you in the green room is, how long did it take you to do that?
Oh, I got serious about LinkedIn in late 2021. So okay. It's been a few years. I mean, this isn't one of those miracle growth stories, where I 10x my following in 6 months. It has been it's been a tortoise process, not a hare.
But those usually are the best ones. So let's talk about it. What's the difference between a B2B fan and a B2B customer on LinkedIn? Because we're going to talk about how to talk to them in different ways. So your descriptions, your definition.
Well, a customer is pretty straightforward. It is someone who is likely to inquire or buy from you. Now, the big difference between them and a fan is a fan. Some fans will also become customers. Some fans are customers, but most of them are not, because most fans are competitors. They're in the same line you are. I do content strategy, so my fans are content strategists, content marketers, copywriters, things like this. While my customers would be people like demand, people who are in demand gen, or heads of marketing, or heads of digital things like this, and they behave differently, and that's the big important thing. Customers tend to be lurkers. They may read your posts, they look at it, but they don't engage. They typically don't engage openly. They usually don't make comments. While your fans, they're the likers, they're the commenters. They're the ones acting more openly. And you know, you need customers if you want to make money, of course,
Right.
but you also need fans so your posts travel, because engagement is the currency of social media.
Right.
If your posts don't get engaged, they don't travel, nobody sees them, and so more customers don't see them, which you also want.
Right. Right. So I love that you said your customers are lurkers, because that's really what I've experienced as well. Because again, they probably hire a content strategist because they don't really know what to do. They just go on LinkedIn, they might see a post, they might connect with you, or if you send a connection request, they're like, yeah. But they usually, my experience, they don't post themselves, they don't really comment on things, but they're watching. And so there's value in having them watch you and then getting to know you through your content, right? So
Exactly.
how does a small B2B team tell from their own data, comments, or who's a fan, who's a customer? What are we looking for? Are we looking for how many people viewed and then how many people commented? Because anybody who's here, there's a couple of people here watching live, and anybody who watches it on the replay, who listens to the podcast, we're going to get into the how, what, why, where, when. We want to give you a strategy to figure this stuff out with your own data, on specifically on LinkedIn as well. So how would this go? How what would you look at?
You mean in terms of the data
Yeah.
the posts are
Yeah.
generating?
Yes.
Well, it is very much a matter of the topic, the subject. It's
Okay.
it's not just about who engages, because LinkedIn, the LinkedIn algorithm and the AI that runs it, routes posts based on interest.
Okay.
So if you're a customer, and if I write something aimed at customers, it is more likely to show it to customers. But if I write something aimed at content people or copywriters, it's more likely to show it to them. So it's not necessarily a matter of analyzing data. It's more like what kind of bait you use.
Oh, tell me a little bit more about that. Bait you use. I love that. That's a great way to say it. So you specifically, so okay, what's my question? So you have a strategy that you use different types of posts, I'm assuming, because that's what we want, right? We want to talk to both the customer and the fan. So tell me about that strategy. How do you put that into action? You use different bait to attract both.
Yes. If you get a feel for the algorithm, for the AI, you begin to understand what sort of content is likely to travel and is likely to perform better with fans, because they're more likely to engage. And with customers, it's less about algorithmic games. It's more about just talking to them straight. It is more about speaking directly to them instead of speaking to the algorithm first and then hoping your fans see it. It's a different thing.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So if somebody were to look at their analytics, to separate that engagement from customer engagement, would somebody need, I guess this is a good question, would somebody need a LinkedIn premium subscription to get more of the details about who is looking at their content?
LinkedIn Sales Navigator, it doesn't necessarily give you more details about who's engaging. I mean, it does give you some, but that's not really where it's useful. Where it's useful is LinkedIn Sales Navigator helps you find who to connect with. That
Oh,
that is its most useful function because it is capable of things like not only can it find people by job title or geography or lots of things, it can also identify people who are active on the platform. And this is something you cannot do on regular LinkedIn. LinkedIn doesn't tell you that, in the free service, but LinkedIn Sales Navigator does tell you who posts, who's active there, which is really important because so many people are on LinkedIn, but they barely show up. They're on it for maybe a few minutes a month. They may be on it for a few minutes a month, and you might not know. Even if they spend a lot of time there, they might not post. So you really have no way of knowing what whether they're really there. But LinkedIn Sales Navigator does help with that. And another thing it does help with is it helps you find business leaders because business leaders have a tendency to want to lay low and not get found on LinkedIn, because they don't want to get, spammed or sold to. But LinkedIn Sales Navigator does cut through the fog. It does help you find them in a clear way, and it saves, it lets you do things you can't do otherwise, and it saves you time.
okay. That's actually that's really good insight into that. So, why do you think most small B2B companies default to writing their content, creating their content for customers first, even when it's fans who do the heavy lifting on that reach and engagement? Is it because they don't understand this principle of these two different ICPs? Or is it because they just push those sales?
I believe that they're doing it mostly just because wisdom says they should. You, you know, I think they hear advice. Target. Focus on customers. Target customers. This is the way. I think it's mostly that. I'm not sure it's necessarily a conscious thing that they're doing. I think it's just more instinctual.
I mean, from my experience, and I work with probably similar clients to what you work with, Jason, is that when I'm in the room with the stakeholders, they do say and they do ask. So, did we get any clients from social media? How, are we having the call to actions to connect with us? I mean, they're actively want us to target and talk to our ICP on social media, and they're forgetting about the value of the fans. And I think that this is probably one of the biggest problems is that, the stakeholders don't understand this principle. I think that I understand
Yes.
it intuitively because I've been in this for a long time, but I think that I've heard nobody say this out loud like you said this today. B2B needs fans, not just customers. Duh, of course we do. But we need to explain this to our stakeholders.
Yeah. I mean, one way to understand it is if you just focus on customers, basically you are creating a funnel that's all bottom. You're focusing on that. You just have that little skinny part of, of the funnel at the bottom. You're not getting that wider reach that you need to build your brand, get found by more customers. You're just focusing on that tiny little bit at the bottom.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of businesses don't realize this because LinkedIn has just been hammering, reach, hammering engagement, just down, 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 down. And so they blame the problem on one thing, and it masks another problem. And so I often think they don't realize this.
Yeah. So we've got Sean is here live and he's asking a question about your comment about bait. On Jason's bait comment, he said, would it be interested in hearing some examples of hooks or content ideas that could work well with customers who are potential customers, right? So, we all know about the hook, but what is something that works for you? What are some things that attract people, both the fans and the customers, to your content that you've been able to scale from 4,000 to 22?
Well, something to remember about that. A lot of the followers I have, they didn't just show up because they saw something and liked it and followed me. You know, a lot of those followers showed up because I connected with them. You know, I reached out to them. You know, I every week, you know, I will use up my full connection quota, you know, connecting with new people. So it's not just, you know, it's not just passive. You know, you do have to connect uh, actively and smartly.
All right. Well,
It,
that
it
go ahead.
sorry,
No,
it
go
is
ahead.
not it is not easy to create content that appeals to both fans and customers. I mean, it depends somewhat on what industry you're in. You know, sometimes they're just more aligned than in others. But when with me, you know, I often I'm often talking, but I'm still often talking. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, copywriters and content people when I'm creating content for fans, but product managers, demand gen people, you know, they're watching too. You know, they may not announce themselves, but they do. You know, it's not really it's not about the hook. You know it's the whole post. You know, you know you can't just focus on that one little thing.
Okay.
I
So
mean,
when you said
a
yeah,
good hook can help your post take off, no doubt about
sure.
it. You know, but it in terms of who sees it, you know, it's the whole thing. But the LinkedIn algorithm does focus mostly on the first 200 characters or so. You know, that's about three, that's about four maybe 4.5 lines. You know, that's the one that you know that it really focuses on to decide who's going to see it. You know, that it studies that and tries to figure out what your post is about and who's going to see it. You know, that first paragraph is important, but it's not necessarily about hooks. You know, it's
Okay.
also about
Well, I
substance.
appreciate you clarifying that because that's what the question was from Sean about the bait. So it is not just dangling a little hook and say, hey, this is the most interesting hook. It's about the whole post that you create either for your fans or for your, you know, ideal client, your ICP. So, Jason, what does your content strategy look like? This is not a question on my list, but I'm super curious now. Like, do you write it out? Do you have a content calendar? Do you post as you go? Do you do for
I
yourself what you do for your clients?
I do have a I do have a calendar, but I would call it highly fluid. You know, maybe half maybe half my posts in each week are the originally scheduled ones, but the other half might be new, you know, new things, news that came up or something that I feel is appropriate to the moment. So it's kind of half and half that way.
Okay. That's interesting because that's kind of how it works for me. I have set posts, obviously posts about strategy talks, and then I do a newsletter every week. So those are set. And then the rest of the week are responses to what's happening in the world, what's happening online, what I see on LinkedIn, what, you know, one of my friends might be talking about. I'm like, oh, that's a good topic. Or if I'm at a conference or, you know, like real life things. So that's very interesting that you have that same type of content strategy. So if a small team says we only have time to create content for one of those, either fans or customers, which seems silly because you're creating posts. But if they say that, if that's their argument, which one would you say gets them the most ROI?
It's important on your website to target customers. That is where you really need to be focused on customers because you need content that answers the questions and queries they're either asking Google or asking ChatGPT. But and that is more it's inbound. You know, it is an inbound it is an inbound process. But social media is outbound. You know, you are sending content out into the world, and that content should mostly be aimed at fans
Okay.
because fans generally they don't want to go onto your website. They want to see the content where they are, where they hang out, you know,
Mm.
whether it's in a newsletter or in their inbox or on LinkedIn or wherever. I mean, I often use the metaphor for customers build roads. You are building a customer journey
Sure.
using content, and you are laying those roads. And with customers, it's not just about posting new things every day. It's about updating your old stuff. So it's kind of like paving and repaving, roads. While with customers, it's more. I use the metaphor of popcorn. You're kind of making popcorn. You're kind of making popcorn for them and sending it out. I mean, I know that sounds kind of light and insubstantial, but popcorn can also last for years. If it's
Right.
proper, if it's in the proper conditions. The
Yeah.
kind of bite-sized, more shareable, more quickly assimilatable. I don't think that's a word, but anyway, but quick to digest content. Bite-sized content.
It's shareable. I think popcorn is shareable. I think that's what we're
Yes,
getting to, right?
It
It
is
is. It
shareable
should
and
be.
it is demandable.
Right.
Someone might demand that you share.
Right. Well, what I'm getting out of this too, and what I believe is true, and that what people forget, it's not necessarily about that specific audience, your fans. It's who the fans know. And I think that's what people forget, because they might have a network of ICPs that you want to tap into. And
Yes,
that's the part that people forget.
Your fans are often your competitors.
Right.
They're either directly your competitors, or they work for your competitors, or they may be journalists or other people who are also connected with your ICP.
Yeah.
So yes, it is not just about the fans. I mean, engaging the fans is useful, but ultimately you want to reach more customers that way.
Right.
And build your brand with them.
Yeah. So we have a couple questions from the audience. Peter's here, and he says, "Is fans not just customers true to social because of engagement versus reach, or is it true of other mediums?"
You mean outside social media?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. What's the question
so
here?
he's saying, is fans not just customers? And I would agree. He might have missed the first part of it, your definition. Fans are people who are like you. So fans would be, if you're a content strategist, other content strategists, other marketers, people that know you, like you, do the similar work
peers.
to you.
They're peers.
They're peers.
That is the best way to think of it.
Yeah. And then customers are people who would ultimately hire you. So your peers will amplify your voice, will amplify your visibility, will engage.
They will amplify it if you share the right kind of content with them. It needs to be shareable. You don't just want to. I mean, long text posts, sure, they perform well, but if you're a business and you want content shared, you need shareable assets. You need infographics, little videos, things like this, things that people are eager to share.
Right. And then we have a couple questions, and I love this, guys. Keep asking questions, but on LinkedIn, people say, so where do we start? Do you start with content pillars, a content plan? And then the other thing is real life things. Do you prioritize putting the content out there? Or do you prioritize perfecting it? Because I spend so much time tweaking that I often miss that opportunity, miss that time. So 2 questions. Where do we start, and how perfect does the content need to be?
I'll answer the second one first because
it's
easier. The hook, that first paragraph that I told you about earlier, that matters. You want that to pop as much as possible. That's what really matters, and you want it to work. The rest of the post, it's not as important because the algorithm focuses mostly on that, and it's what people see, unless they click the post to see more. And something that is important to remember, content tends to perform better or social media content, especially, it tends to perform better when it's a little raw. And a lot of AI content, it has a lot of people call it overly polished. I'm not exactly sure I agree with that, but I get their sentiment.
It's too
And people
perfect.
people are becoming more sensitive to it. That
Mm.
they're seeing it faster. Their little AI detector up here, is seeing it faster, and you really don't want that detector going off.
No.
You want to make sure that it doesn't, because a lot of people will not stick around for it. They will not. A lot of people will not stick around for AI. I mean, I'm not saying they'll never do it. I mean, it depends very much on who you are.
Right.
If you're a Fortune 500 CEO, people will read what you post no matter what.
Right. No matter what.
But
Yeah.
If you're just someone starting out, no. I mean, you need to be real.
Yeah.
The little guy or girl needs to be real.
Yeah.
I think it's very important.
Yes. So
Sorry, I forgot.
I'm gonna answer
I
the
forgot
first
what the other one
question.
was.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm gonna
yeah.
answer the first question. The question is, where do we start? Do you start with content pillars? I kind of answered that question earlier, but I'm gonna repeat it. So what I do is that my content pillars, my content that goes every week, are for my ICP, which is this strategy talks, right? I'm talking to small business owners, I'm talking to people who are struggling with visibility, talking about content strategy. If you're listening to this, most likely you are my ICP. This is what I post on Tuesdays. I go live because I want to share with you. And of course, there's some fans here, some other marketers that are going to support me and watch this and might get some great ideas from this as well. But that's one. The other one is Strategy Talks, the newsletter, which goes out on Mondays now. And that's also directed at my ICP. And then usually there's some sort of recap, whether it's a carousel or my podcast goes out or a little clip, something. And those three pieces of content are directed at my ICP, right? This is me sharing my expertise. But everything else I do on LinkedIn specifically is for my fans. It's talk about AI. It's talk about how I do content. It's talk about, marketing conferences I go to. It's to engage the fans. So if you're struggling with that, with how to start, I think that's a great place to start. Start with one or two or maybe three posts that are directed at your ICP and that are, kind of filling that requirement of talking to your customer with strong call to actions, and then the rest fill in. And Jason, I'm going to now give it to you. How would you tell someone to start?
Content pillars are good because the LinkedIn algorithm prefers it if you stay focused on certain topics. It likes it when you stay focused on kind of two or three main subjects that you approach. It prefers that because it's an autocomplete engine, and if it knows what's coming, if the content is somewhat predictable in its substance, it likes that. So yes, I mean I do believe that content pillars can be useful, especially because at the beginning you're going to struggle for ideas. It won't be or at least a lot of people will, and a lot of businesses will. And pillars help focus the mind. They take away that paralysis of infinite choice. It'll help you at the beginning. I mean, once you develop a habit, you post more and more content, it'll get easier for you to generate more ideas. They'll come to you more naturally, but they are definitely most useful at the beginning.
That's awesome. Jason, I promised you we would stay under 30 minutes, but we're at 29 minutes already. This is unbelievable. I've got one more question if you have another minute.
Okay.
The question is, if somebody is watching this, has listened to this, and we're at almost 30 minutes in, and they realize that all the content they've created has been for their customer and none for their fans, what would you tell them to change this week? What kind of post would you tell them to create right now?
I would tell them to you need if you've only been focusing on customers, then fans aren't following you. Customers are following. Customers will be following you because that's who you've been posting for. So starting out at first, you would want something that is very shareable. You want content that is built to travel. You want something like useful infographics or carousels or things of this nature. You're going to need those kind of posts at first to help attract fans. Later, you can go, more text focused. A little. You can go less meat. You can be simpler and more direct. But at first, you're going to need glamour content, for lack of a better word, to help get that ball rolling in terms of getting fans to follow you.
All right, that's really good, and I think that's really useful because I think there's quite a few people out here on LinkedIn and everywhere else on the internet that have been told to use social media to attract their ICP, and especially if you're an in-house social media manager and you're talking to stakeholders, they want to know exactly, well, how many ICPs did we attract? How many leads? How many qualified sales leads do we have? And they just have so much pressure on them where they're not giving that opportunity to also talk to the fans and also, do the fun type of content that attracts more fans. And, if you guys want to know, I'll give you an example. And this is a shout out to Social Insider. It's a team that I absolutely love. And they completely cater to both the ICP and the fans. They do lots of fun trending content with their team. They post on LinkedIn all the time. They've really grown their LinkedIn, and they really, really embody this, B2B needs fans, not just customers. So go check out Social Insider. And now, Jason, where can people connect with you? Because I absolutely love this. You and I have been connected for a while on LinkedIn, but we never really talked. I think this was a fantastic strategy talk. There's definitely some great takeaways for everybody that's listening to this on the replay, listening to this as a podcast. Where can people connect with you?
Well, on LinkedIn, I mean, it is my mothership. It is the primary source of my attention, and it is where I hang out the most. So, and it is where I am most likely to talk about work.
Okay. All right. Awesome. I'll make sure that Jason's linked in the show notes so you all can connect with the right Jason Patterson, just in case there's more than one, and you get to connect with him. And I'll be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. Thank you so much for being here. And Jason, once again, thank you so much for your great insight. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.